It's always good to see you, but especially this year, it's good to see everyone. It's been a very difficult year for all of us. It's been a very long year, and I think during the next couple of days, we're going to try to understand not so much what happened, we know what happened, but where do we go from here? How do we as a people actually pick up our pieces, make ourselves whole, and just keep on going? I have to share with you that there are so many stories that I would love to tell you. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. Or fortunately. Depends on, whether you like stories or not. But I've selected a couple of them that I think are important for us to hear, and most importantly, to remember. Let me take us back to a couple of weeks after October 7th. The first time I went to Israel after October 7th was exactly a month later, in November. And I experienced one of the most incredible things that I've experienced as a Jew in my entire life. Now, you probably are thinking, well, you're a rabbi, you get to experience all these things, but truly, I went through something that was life-changing, life-altering. And it was beyond just looking at what had happened in Israel. And I need to tell you the story of a remarkable individual to do that. Rosh. Rosh was a young woman from Atlanta, Georgia, who made Aliyah to Israel when she was 18 years old. And Rosh, right away after she got to Israel, she enlisted and she was drafted into the border police, Mishmeret Bul. And by the way, she would spend the weekends at Kibbutz Saad, which is very near the Gaza Strip. She would go there on Shabbat, she would go there for the holidays. So of course, that Simchat Torah, that October 7th, she was at Kibbutz Saad. And one of the things that happened, let me tell you the end of the story. Kibbutz Saad was one of the only kibbutzim that suffered no deaths, no casualties. And it was in no small measure because of Rosh Lubin. As soon as she heard the sirens, and as soon as she actually could understand what was going on, she went outside her room, went to the armory of the kibbutz, got the security team together, and gave them all weapons. She was single-handedly responsible for taking down 30 Hamas terrorists. About 100 terrorists attacked Kibbutz Saad, and they did not breach the gate. Again, Rose, that young woman from Atlanta, was instrumental in doing so. Let me tell you a little bit about her. When she was 8 years old, and she went to the playground, she would tell the other kids, well, I can be your friend now, but when I grow up, I'm moving to Israel, so we're not going to be friends anymore. I'm leaving. Her parents said that Israel was like an extension of her. On her own. Nobody told her to do that. Nobody brought her up that way. She just picked it up. It was part of her DNA. When I landed in Israel that November 2023, when we woke up the first morning, I was with a group of about 15 rabbis from all denominations. One of our colleagues said, look, the Shiva for Rosh Lubin is just down the street. We should go. I said, who's Rosh Lubin? So it turns out that after October 7th, she went back to her unit in the old city in Jerusalem. And while she was on patrol, a Palestinian terrorist murdered her with a knife. She was rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do for her. So that first morning of that first trip, I found myself at Rosh's Shiva. It is incredible, but she had no family in Israel. She was the true definition of a lone soldier. Yet, there were 600 people at the Shiva. And because her parents do not live in Israel, they live in Atlanta, the city of Jerusalem put up a tent next to the King David Hotel where they were holding the prayer services for the Shiva. So when we got there, I experienced something I've never seen in my life. Jews, all shapes, colors, sizes, denominations, colors of clothing, black hats, no hats, neither kippot, talis, no talis, black Jews, white Jews, gay Jews, straight Jews, Chinese Jews. Everyone was there for Rose's family, praying as one people. What seemed impossible for our people to do for decades and hundreds of years became possible after October 7th. These young women from Atlanta taught us a lesson that I will never forget. That we need to live together as Jews, as brothers and sisters. Because the one thing that makes us weak is our lack of unity. And the moment when we come together, we become tremendously strong. You should have seen that tent. It was packed. I've never seen so many people at the Shiva in my entire life. And look, I've been to a lot of Shivas, unfortunately. And there was no food. So everybody was there to pray, to embrace those parents. And when the prayer service was over, people were going up to them and holding them in their arms. I've never seen anything like it. And I remember what I thought. At that moment, I thought Rose could be my own child. Her parents were younger than me. And then I thought, no, she is my child. From suburbia in the United States, made Aliyah, that was her dream, was going to go to college in Israel after the army. And then I remember thinking, the one thought that has never left me since that day, we are a people of heroes. We don't say that loud enough or often enough. The reason why we're still here is because we heroically have endured everything that history has thrown at us. The question that I have is, will we be able to endure whatever happens next? We also, after October 7th, many people who didn't care about being Jewish, they came out of the woodwork. They joined synagogues. They enrolled in classes. For some reason, the attack of these cruel and evil enemies made us come together like never before, like we couldn't know it was possible. The question is, are we going to be able to remain united? And the answer should be yes, at any cost we should. Let me tell you what breaks my heart. In spite of what I experienced, and I have to tell you, the real crisis, as much as it's in Israel, as you already saw, Israel will take care of itself. Israel will defend herself, and we will be there because we have no choice. And not only do we have no choice, but that's where we need to be. But the real crisis is happening here. outside of Israel, where so many of our own children have turned against us. And this is something that no one wants to address and no one likes talking about. It's painful. In all of those college campuses, in those encampments, there were Jews everywhere. And what did we hear? Oh, because I am Jewish, I have to make sure we don't do to others what they did to us. Oh, because I am Jewish, I have a responsibility to look at people's human rights. I've never heard so much baloney in my entire life. When did we go so wrong that in our pursuit to fit in, to be compassionate, to be empathetic, we teach our children to be more compassionate for others than they are for their own people? It's something that we really need to have a conversation about. If you want to know how ridiculous it is, rape became a form of resistance in their minds. And exploding pagers, a violation to human rights. That's what's going on in their minds. You have no idea how many social media feeds I saw of people laughing at the exploding pages, because let's face it, it was incredible. And other people saying, no, we can't do that. Because we are Jewish, we cannot make fun of our enemies, especially when they fall. You know, I never saw so many Jews that became so religious about one thing, but not about anything else. And in my mind, I often saw people saying these things while eating a ham sandwich. Seriously. It's called moral kashrut. It's the only thing that matters. And it's a bad understood morality. This thing with the exploding beepers, pagers, let me just talk about it for a couple of minutes. I think that not only do we have a right to laugh at it, but it's a mitzvah to laugh at it. Because after everything we faced, and everything that was done to us, after our babies were burned in ovens in the kibbutzim, after many of us went to Israel and saw what happened in those places, for 1 second, we took our humanity back and we said, you know what? Finally we responded. Finally we woke up. There's a beautiful Gemara, there's a beautiful piece of the Talmud in Masechet Megillah that talks about Mordechai from the Purim story. As Haman is being brought to the gallows in a horse, Mordechai jumps and kicks him in the tush. It's a story the rabbis tell. And Haman turns around and says, hey, Mordechai, what are you doing to me? Doesn't your Torah say that Jews are not supposed to make fun of their enemies as they fall? And Mordechai looks at him and says, Hani mili ve'Israel, which in other words means, there are enemies and there are enemies. So once in a while, we are allowed to kick them in the tush as they're taken to the gallows, especially when they try to wipe us out of the face of the earth. I'm sure you all saw the movie Munich, and you all remember the scene, right? where the Mossad agents tell one another, we cannot rejoice in killing our enemies. In the story of Passover, God tells the angels not to cheer or sing while the Egyptians are being drowned, because they are God's children too. But what the movie Munich did not tell us is the second part of that midrash, which says that as God quieted the angels, he allowed the children of Israel to sing. As Yashir Moshe, Moses sang a song as he was crossing the sea while the Egyptians were dying. Tomorrow, I'm going to share with you the life of the Eish Kodesh, Rabbi Kalman Kolonimo Shapira, who was a rabbi of the Warsaw Ghetto, who in the past couple of months has inspired me tremendously through his writing. The Eish Kodesh wrote about what I just said, about that episode at the Sea of Reeds. He said, you know why God allowed the children of Israel to sing? And why he quieted the angels? Because the angels were never murdered or tortured or burned. But we have. Because the angels don't know what it's like to be Jewish in this world when everyone turns against you. He wrote that, by the way, as the ghetto was falling on him. So how can we not laugh at the exploding pagers? I want to make sure that in our effort to be people that fit in the world, people that enjoy living in the world as equals with others, we do not lose our sense of history, and we do not lose our sense of telling our own story. We cannot fall victims of other people's narratives, because then we're lost. Especially when the narratives are 100% false. A friend of mine sent me a text that said, I love Rosh Hashannah. I remember walking to shul with my grandfather. I remember when I learned to blow the shofar. And I feel like I failed my children. They don't even go to shul. They don't want to know anything about being Jewish. So here's another story. In a kingdom far away, there was a king who presided over this kingdom called Grapeland. Not Graceland, Grapeland. And this kingdom was famous because it produced the most incredible wine in the world. Every farmer that lived there had the best grapes. They exported the wine all over. And they were famous not only because the grapes were good, but the wine was perfectly aged in amazing barrels. So the king was so proud of his kingdom that one day he decided he was going to abolish taxes. There was no need for taxes. He said, you know what? We're going to do something entirely different. Instead of giving me taxes, we're going to set up a collection spot in the middle of the city where everyone is going to bring a jar of wine after the harvest. And you're going to bring the best wine that you have, and you're going to pour it in that barrel. And then we're going to sell it as our best wine. And with that, we'll pay for our roads and education and everything. And there will be no taxes. Everybody was super happy. You can imagine. So when the time came, people lined up. And they were all pouring a jar of wine into the barrel. These went on for weeks. And they were replacing the barrels. And the stock of wine was great. So the king was sure he was going to sell this wine for so many millions. There will be no need for anything or want in his country anymore. So finally he asked one of his advisors to please bring one of the barrels so he could taste the wine. They put a cup in the wine. He tastes it. And this was the strangest wine he'd ever seen. It had no color. It had no smell. And when he tasted it, it tasted like nothing. He says, this cannot be happening. Bring me another barrel. So they went through 10 barrels. And every barrel was the same. So he called his alchemist. And the alchemist came and says, please examine the wine. I want to know what's wrong with the wine. So the alchemist examines the wine. Says, Your Majesty, I don't know how to tell you this. This is not wine. It's water. So the king went crazy. And then one of his advisors says, Your Majesty, nobody was trying to wrong us. These people were just being human. They thought that if they poured water, nobody was going to be able to taste the difference because the person next to them will be pouring wine. But it turns out that because they're human, everyone had the same thought. Imagine in our lives, if we let everything we believe in, everything we stand for, be cared for or kept by the person next to us. What does it matter what I do? If Moshe or Shloime or Shmuel are going to do it for me. You know, one of the worst feelings that I had since October 7th is that I haven't done enough. And I'm sure that many of you feel the same. And we've done a lot. But the overriding feeling is, what else can I do? How else can I help? Surely I haven't done what I have to do. I wake up every morning, and that weighs on my shoulders. And trust me, I'm not pouring water. Neither are the majority of us. This year has taught us that if we want our children to be proud of who they are, they need to see us engaged in helping one another as Jews. We cannot let it happen that they believe it's more fashionable or better, or it makes them better Jews. To help our enemies. These are difficult words to take in. It's always easier to be a victim than to be strong. The story of victimhood is the story of my grandparents, of your grandparents. It is not our story. For 2,000 years, we have tried to get out of being victims. After 2,000 years, we finally can defend ourselves. We cannot go back and pretend that being a victim is always better. A hen was walking around one day, and she happened to find a couple of eggs. Since she didn't have any chicks of her own, she sat on those eggs for a couple of weeks. And when the eggs hatched, they were not chicken, they were ducks. So these ducks grew up following the mother hen. DJ has something like that going on in his house for sure. He has ducks that come every season. They love his pool. And this chicken was walking around, and the ducks were following her. And they were moving like chicken, and they were picking at the ground. But one day, they went by the side of a pond. And the ducklings just jumped at the water. And the mother hen says, no, you're going to die, you're going to drown, don't do that. But they could swim. And when they get out, they shake the water off and say, Mom, don't cry. Don't blame us for your limitations. We need to make sure that we understand our history and our story. We completely misjudged history. And that's what brought us to this point. We will talk much more about it. But for now, let us just understand that our story is in our hands. We are the ones who are writing it. And it comes with tremendous responsibility. May God endow us with the koach, with the ruach, with the power and the spirit to write the rightful story of our people. Shana Tova u'metuka. May this be a year of sweetness, of triumph, of joy, and of health. Amen. May I please ask us to rise?